They say that in late-stage capitalism, you will own nothing
and you will be happy.
Well, guess what? Wall Street now owns your home, banks make billions off your debt, and government made your cash so worthless, you're paying your Chipotle burrito in 4 separate installments. But here's the thing though, it wasn't always like this. The pillar of the American economy used to be ownership, but that's obviously in the past. So what does it run on now? Well, your financial stupidity. Don't believe me? Well, credit card rewards that you probably enjoy are literally funded by people who carry huge balances. And it's getting so bad where consumer debt alone just hit $17 trillion, and making fun of the financially stupid is now reality TV.
Would it be a bad decision to purchase some rental property to increase the cash flow?
You're broke.
Wanting to live in a mindset of abundance, so it's like I want to buy.
Why live in a mindset of abundance?
Because it feels good.
Oh, because it feels good. I'm glad we're doing things that feel good.
So when people call this socialism for the rich, capitalism for the poor, they're not wrong. Because when the financially stupid makes a mistake, they get the profit, but when Wall Street defaults, they're too big to fail. And look, all of this is very worrying, and I'm saying this as a capitalist, but this isn't capitalism anymore. It's an economy that banks on the financially stupid to make stupid mistakes where you will continue to own nothing and be happy. But the hope is, once you see how they pull this off, you can understand how to win.
If people don't own things, they don't feel ownership of the country they're in, and the country gets super volatile.
If I can't get a house, I can't find a way to feel roots in the society that I'm in, then I'm gonna drift out of it. I'm going to disengage.
So to understand how we got to this point where we're renting everything forever, we actually have to go a little bit back in history. A time where you could buy a house and actually keep the things that you paid for. Because what we're seeing today didn't just happen overnight. After World War II, America had what economists called the golden age of capitalism. There was high growth, a rising middle class, and a balanced economy in which both businesses and workers did relatively well. The government broke up monopolies, workers had strong unions, and competition was fierce. Because if you wanted to screw over customers, fine, a competitor will just steal your business. Look, I'm not claiming that it was perfect, but it was what true capitalists like you and I would vouch for: fair competition and meritocracy. But starting in the 1980s, something changed. Ronald Reagan won, and to this day is the most dominant election victory, but soon after came policy shifts. Top tax rates on the richest fell and corporate taxes dropped. Capital tax gains got friendlier, so owning assets started beating earning wages. Additionally, stock buybacks were legalized, and so profits soon flowed to shareholders, not paychecks. And as I talked about in many videos, junk bonds and leverage buyouts that private equity loves to use to buy up companies and housing exploded. And remember this because this will all make sense in the later segments. But anyways, one of the biggest changes came with the push to deregulate industries and let free market ideology do its thing. Which is great in many aspects, and it absolutely led to an expansion of the economy, but what it also created were trade-offs that we're still seeing today. Governments stopped breaking up big companies. They started letting them merge instead. Big banks started gobbling up small regional ones. Airlines went from dozens of competitors to just 4 big conglomerates controlling 80% of flights, and the same story with media. Over 75% of US industries saw massive consolidation from 1997 to 2012 and brought forth a new age of monopolies and corporatism. And as I'll get into later, what also grew were these monopolies and their ties to the government, which brings us to today. We're at $37 trillion in national debt. Government prints more money to keep spending up and worsening inflation. And like I covered in my private equity and housing video, even fundamental aspects of the American dream like home ownership is increasingly becoming another subscription where corporate investors now buy 1/3 of all single-family homes. To put simply, financial engineering was born, which made assets go up exponentially while wages have fallen, leading to this worsening wealth inequality that we're seeing today. And most importantly, we went from an economy of ownership to renting permission to use anything. So when they say that you'll own nothing and be happy, they're not just describing some dystopian future. They're kind of describing right now where renting is becoming the new normal. And it starts getting really dark when you realize that this all works because America is set up to make money off the financially stupid. And for me, the last thing I want to be is a dumb creator. That's why I use my sponsor, Opus Clip. And they've grown way beyond clipping. Now it's one of the most powerful AI growth tools for creators. And with automated workflows, my long videos get pulled in, auto-edited into clips, and soon even scheduled to post while offline. The new editor is faster than ever with fresh caption styles, and their upgraded Reframe Anything is basically autopilot for framing. It locks onto your subject perfectly, but you can still take control whenever you want. Apart from my channel, Opus has also powered creators like Jubilee, Mark Rober, and Tom Segura with clips hitting tens of millions of views. It's not just editing, it's growth. So don't gamble on your content strategy. Try Opus Clip with the link below for 1 week free plus 3 months at 50% off and see how much faster you can grow. So now back to the video. Because this whole economy that we see today is only held up by the financially stupid decisions that people make. It'll become pretty obvious to you when you see how Wall Street banks have built their entire business model to keep you financially confused. But the thing is, they're not the only ones that's benefiting from this. There's a good chance that you watching is too. American consumers pay $120 billion a year in credit card interest and fees alone. But really think about that. Because let's say if everybody just paid off their credit card bills in full every single month, that $120 billion would disappear overnight. But obviously that's not realistic, nor is that going to be a reality for people who need to max their credit cards to even survive. But point is, that's exactly where the real money is made, on that demographic. The average credit card APR is now 24%, which is higher than what Tony Soprano would have charged you if he lent you money. But the problem is that they mask these rates and fees behind complex terms that most people don't understand. For example, one is overdraft fees, where they call it a courtesy service, so you won't notice how you're being charged. So I think a lot of you know this, but let's say you're buying something, but you go $5 over the current balance that you have in your account. Banks will then be nice by covering that overdraft charge. Because of that courtesy, they will then charge you, let's say, a $35 fee for it, instead of just making it so you can't complete that purchase. So in that example, you're literally essentially paying 7x the amount that you could have. So then now you're charged a $35 fee on a charge that they covered for you. Until it was recently reformed, banks used to make $12 billion a year from people accidentally spending more than they had in their account. And as you can imagine, this punishes the very people that are least able to afford it. And that's a common theme here, which leads me to payday loans and car title loans that you've probably seen in sketchier parts of wherever you live. Well, most of you watching probably didn't notice, but those payday loans often carry effective APRs of 300 to 600%. And that's exactly how they make $2.4 billion a year in fees, which is bonkers. But again, common theme is that the real money is made by counting on these customers to roll over on their loans repeatedly, creating a cycle of dependency. So the point is, the whole business model of these lenders is based on borrowers not understanding math and having no other alternatives. And in a more modern version, we're now even seeing this with buy now, pay later options that has exploded 970% in just 2 years. And yes, a lot of that growth is being driven by the financially stupid, buying things that they shouldn't buy or can't afford. But interestingly, a lot of the growth is also being driven by younger people who are using it to finance everyday purchases like groceries. But the thing is, I haven't even gotten to the most interesting part. Because like I said, you are probably benefiting from all this too. Credit card rewards, those points and miles that you think that you're getting for free. Well, they're literally funded by those people that I just described who can't pay off their balances. And look, I'm someone who uses credit card points for travel all the time, so I understand this well. Because the only reason why you even get credit card rewards is because of the poor people who carry balances and pay 24% on interest and overdraft fees that allow you to even rack up these rewards. But it's not just that. The thing is, credit cards are so embedded with everything that we pay for. Merchants also have to pay 2 to 3% fees every time you use a credit card to pay for something. So those fees are already baked into the prices of things that you're already buying. So what this means is that cash users with no credit cards, who are often lower income, are paying higher prices to subsidize your credit card points and rewards, whereas you're at least indirectly funding your own rewards when you use your credit card to pay for something. So there's a good chance when you're flying business class or first class on free points, someone making minimum wage indirectly funded that. So it's no wonder that a Federal Reserve study found that reward cards transfer $15 billion a year from low-income cardholders to high-income ones. And there's a reason why this system barely exists anywhere else but in America. In Europe, they cap credit card interest rates and limit interchange fees, so there's no massive reward programs because there's no massive profits to fund them. So when I say that America has built an entire economy around the financially stupid, I'm not trying to be an asshole. Okay, it's a bit of rage bait to get you to keep watching, but Wall Street is literally counting on this demographic to make their money. And like Dave Chappelle said, it's more expensive to be broke in America.
You are not poor. He said, poor is a mentality. Don't you forget it, son. You are broke.
But then again, what happens if everyone suddenly becomes financially savvy overnight, paying off debt, avoiding fees, and shopping for better rates? The interesting question becomes, will this entire system collapse? Well, the answer to that question brings us to the third part of the puzzle. Because in a real capitalist system, if you take risks, you might find rewards, but you also might face consequences. But the reality is, that's not a case for some. Here's what I mean. In 2008, Wall Street banks made reckless bets and lost trillions of dollars and almost crashed the global economy. But instead of going bankrupt and facing consequences like they should have, taxpayers had to bail them out. So while that arguably prevented total economic collapse, it also established a precedent where financial institutions enjoy an implicit government insurance policy. And it's exactly what's happening today. An IMF and Bloomberg study found that the implicit subsidy for big US banks is worth about $80 billion per year. And as you can imagine, if you have this big of an insurance policy, that lets them take bigger risks and charge lower rates than, let's say, smaller banks who don't have that safety net. But it's not just banks. When the pandemic hit, airlines got $50 billion in bailouts. Big corporations got Fed support to buy their bonds. Meanwhile, small businesses waited months for PPP loans that often never came. But they're not just subsidizing bailouts. Walmart and McDonald's pay wages so low that their workers need food stamps and Medicaid to survive. So indirectly, taxpayers are essentially subsidizing these companies' labor costs, and it's a common theme of corporatism and how they offload costs to society. Now, you can also say that at the end of the day, your market value determines your pay, and these workers also have a choice in what jobs that they accept, but let's also look at taxes. In 2020, 55 of the Fortune 500 companies paid zero federal income tax. Nike made billions in profit and got a $109 million tax rebate. FedEx, Salesforce, who I used to work for, Dish Network, all profitable, all paid negative taxes. And it's also a similar story with billionaires and how they often pay lower tax rates than their secretaries. For example, Musk gets paid in stock options from his companies instead of taking a salary that the IRS can tax. Then he goes to a bank, uses those stocks as collateral, and takes out a $100 million loan. He uses that money for houses, cars, vacations, or buying companies like X. And since it's technically debt, not income, it's not taxable income to the government. So being completely honest, you can't really blame them. They're also just playing the rules of the game. You would do the same. But I think what becomes a problem with all this is that this system continues through regulatory capture. For example, the 2010 Citizens United Supreme Court ruling allowed unlimited corporate political spending and increasingly the growing revolving door. Former Goldman Sachs executives run the Treasury. Monsanto lawyers work at the FDA. Telecom lobbyists run the FCC. Despite bipartisan agreement that all of this is unfair, it's still there because of lobbying. In real capitalism, this revolving door that blurs the line between public and private sectors would be broken up. And if none of this is convincing, even our founding fathers would agree. In 1816, Thomas Jefferson urged Americans to crush in its birth the aristocracy of our moneyed corporations in a letter to George Logan. The Boston Tea Party, as is commonly known, wasn't just about taxation, it was also a protest against the East India Company, a government-backed monopoly that undercut colonial merchants. So what most people don't talk about is that the Boston Tea Party was literally protesting corporate socialism in 1773. So when people say that we have socialism for the rich, capitalism for the poor, they're not being dramatic. Banks profit off the financially stupid because debt means interest payments for life. And corporations profit off the financial stupid by hiring the smartest MBAs to get you to open your wallet without thinking twice. And instead of true capitalism of competition and ownership and separation between private and public interests, governments join the ranks of corporatism to profit off their revolving door. So then the question becomes, what exactly can you watching do about this? The uncomfortable truth that we establish is that our culture encourages bad financial decisions on purpose. And it's exactly the reason why you're never taught these things in school. Because even if you live in the 29 US states that requires it, it's basic. Because the more people that become financially savvy, the less it fuels our consumption-driven economy and everything collapses. So if you care about this country like I do, you have to acknowledge the bad with the good. The thing is, each country and culture has a choice. America made a choice of unlimited innovation and economic freedom, but at the cost of extracting wealth from the financially stupid. So whether it's fair or unfair, once you understand how money and power works, the choice becomes yours. Because the thing is, you can get credit card rewards funded by other people's interest payments. You can use debt strategically like billionaires to an extent by borrowing against assets instead of paying taxes. And you can invest in the same companies that are profiting from their relationship with the government. Because even though capitalism isn't perfect, it is the best system that we got. But in that system, you have two choices: subsidize everyone else's wealth or build your own. The rules aren't changing. The only question is, what side do you want to be on? So if you're already not one of the 2,400 people learning how money and power works, you can sign up for my totally free newsletter in the video description, where next week I'll be going even deeper into this topic. But if you'd rather just keep learning from the next video, then go watch this video next on how our consumption-driven economy feels like it's becoming more and more of a gamble every day.